Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal are a set of games that time has been very unpleasant to. From once beloved because other options just never existed to completely forgotten while we ramble on about the same games but better, egregious pop-in, uninspired Pokemon designs, and other meaningless forms of conversation. But today, I'm dragging you in to reignite the discussion to see if Pokemon Gold and Silver and their irrelevant brother of Crystal are even good at all. After all, surely with time, standards don't rise, leaving games in the dust a lot, right? If the game was once good, it's still good, right? Ifs aside, it's time to lock in into our definitive Gen 2 deep dive to see if the games in question are certified bangers or just a wet fart with a simple over-analysis where I have a single goal: to be fair. Let's lock in these timestamps and get ready for a complete chore that is the great leap forward of Pokemon Gold Silver and the one that didn't need to exist. But first, a little bit of shilling. We live stream on 2 different platforms now. Consider dropping by, that's all, thank you. Jumping right into the worlds, we have a brand new region with Johto, the home of empty open fields, optional caves people forget exist, alongside the also important freedom of choice, but only somewhat. What that leaves us with is a region that's just okay, that just leans a little too much in terms of its exploration, as its plentiful side areas leave something to be done as you sit and roll your eyes at the lacking main world the region has. Although in terms of forced content, this game really just feels like a half of a Pokemon region, just really dropping the ball in terms of sheer size and time spent playing through it. Not to mention the little bit of an identity crisis it might have going on. Like Gen 1, it suffers from field, cave, water route. Hardly any diversity in sight. Well, that's a bit of a lie because Johto, as we know it, is known as Kanto's Shadow because yeah, not only does this game just shamelessly recycle Kanto content left and right with the reuse of the evil team, which is cool outside of the plot reasons, alongside the reuse of Kanto mons, a little too much as we're gonna see, but most importantly, Kanto is just here as an entire play space, and is sadly just the biggest draw of the game, despite easily being the worst part of it. Ignoring the part where the novelty of 2 regions that sells the game in the first place exists, Kanto does unfortunately drop the ball quite a lot. But it really only succeeds at being natural post-game because it just lacks so much substance, sadly missing out on that feel of a 2-act structure game, unlike the remakes. Although saying that's the only place it succeeds is kind of wrong because it's nostalgia, what do you expect it to be? Where here, we get damn near full freedom of choice for the worse, only really having a whopping of 2 progression pieces and nothing else for unlocks, fitting the frame of the victory lap pretty well because all of this is just a mad dash to the finish, as there's really just not much else to do once you get here, especially as 3 entire dungeons that made for great side content were completely scrapped in order to even ship the game in the first place. Unfortunately, ignoring the main gameplay side of things, Kanto's just a wash waiting to get so much worse, but whatever, that's out of reach for now, as navigating the worlds is the issue. HMs first, we got 7 total and 5 mandatory to ever beat the Johto art, with 2 specifically as must-haves for Kanto. Cut and Whirlpool are great because they are physically unmissable. No issues here. Waterfall shouldn't ever be missed, but of course, hypothetically speaking, it is possible. Fly somehow also falls in this category because talk to random NPC. Flash is a shame due to being tied to completely optional story content, while being optional in itself. Although with how caves look now, it may as well be mandatory. Surf is again missable, yet mandatory because the game still doesn't really point you in the correct direction, expecting you to just walk around aimlessly into any unique looking building you see and talk to everyone you find. In this case, your objective is just a normal building with a sign outside of it. And of course, for some reason, beyond simple accessibility logic, gotta go into a random looking house just for the strength HM, which is mandatory for the next gym immediately, just so you forget about grabbing strength on your repeat runs, cross the sea forward, and then cross the sea back because you're locked out of fly. Because hey, you're not going anywhere. Weirdly, Headbutt does join the pool of TMs with overworld effects this time, which is just another means of wild encounters, but still something that's going to require a move slot that you're very much not going to want to get rid of, and worst of all, being easily deletable by complete accidents. Once again, HMs cause team building restraints that, despite there being more of them and for longer, thankfully here, it's not a permanent death sentence as we'll see in the gameplay briefly later. Just a shame the overworld overstays its welcome once again with backtracking galore. Mons games always seem to have a problem with this, so of course I'm going to be here to help walk you through the plot inconveniences. We begin with a 2 and from out the gates for the egg fetching and rival nonsense, putting us at 2. 3 when we gotta return to the lighthouse. 4 with the return from the Lake of Rage. 5 and 6 when the radio tower stuff happens. And finally a 7th to set off towards the Pokemon League. Whereas Kanto only has 5 moments to note. First when leaving the power plant, a second when returning, 3rd with the short walk off 25 from Pestering Misty, 4 with the trip to Oak's Lab, and finally a 5th for your fly point towards the end game. And that's all, at least for gold and silver. At whopping 12, hey, go back to insert location here. Why would we bother having intricate map design? Don't be silly moments. The potential to be a chore is there, but said issue is made worse when trying to simply enjoy the post game, because traveling between the two regions couldn't just be as simple as two maps that properly function with the ability to simply switch between the two. Oh no, buddy, you can only fly to the region you are currently in, and going between the two is just intended to waste your time. In Johto's 4 paths across the border, we have to fly to the final area of the game and then hold right to fly for a second time. The second fastest path involves heading to New Bark Town just to be forced to surf before flying to where you want to go. The third path is the only one that properly works both ways, being the completely optional magnet train, requiring flying, dialogue, a cutscene, leaving a building, then flying where in the region you're needed, and finally for a fourth, a time-gated trip by boat that requires flying over to Olivine, sitting through dialogue, using a healing bed, more dialogue, and then, of course, flying away for freedom. Kanto, on the other hand, only realistically has 2. From worst to best, repeating the boat ride but from Vermilion, again, still time-gated, and the better option of repeating the magnet train ride but from Saffron City. Yeah, unless you've lost your damn mind thinking flying to Viridian then thinking about crossing routes 22 and 28 just to fly from Mount Silver would be a good idea, those two are basically the only ways out of your favorite region. If you've played the remakes, you already know how freeing it is just to have 2 simple fly menus to fix all of your problems, rather than whatever the hell this mess is supposed to be. In terms of navigation alone, Johto's already jumping hurdles while Kanto can't even find the sprint track. Somehow, though, we're still not done in regards to overworld nonsense, as the games finally became overwhelming, and I say that sarcastically, as this is where the day-night cycle and weekly event systems are introduced to overcomplicate everything. With just primary functions on the table, the day-night cycle gives us a noticeable overworld view change with time-based lighting, but the real difference generally comes down to alterations with the encounter tables on routes and other side features, both of which help immensely in immersion while assisting in replayability, although issues arise when the time gating steps in. Come on, man, it doesn't just track for 24 hours, but also the days of the week itself, which of course mainly matter for the side content. But hey, at least here for now, it's just another drop in the bucket of personality that the game kinda needs as a crutch, and generally speaking, a great mechanic to see later on throughout the series. Which brings us to our final out of battle but also in battle quirk, being the revamped bag. Instead of one pretty small one-screened menu that hosted everything for items that frequently needed the item storage system to step in and lend a hand, now our bag sees actual organization between the item pockets. In practicality, it more than doubles what you can carry despite the main item pockets still only having 20 slots, meaning you're not actually walking up to something required to progress the game and having to throw something into storage, either sell it with bad timing or just toss the item on the fly with anything really. Only items from the actual item pocket, not TMs, hell, not even key items are an issue, or even Pokeballs. The only inconvenience that'll happen here when having too many items is like what? You're not gonna pick up more escape ropes or healing items? Yeah, that's a pretty big leg up, especially when you have way more storage. Yeah, it's a pretty big leg up and one that can't go understated in impact, which allows us to round out the overworld side of things. We end up with a 2-part world with normal backtracking and HM issues, even featuring fly being a complete pain in the rear to use, alongside ups in some of the navigation aspects like the key items and HMs always being able to be on you. Heck, even the select button now existing to make key items even easier to access, which we haven't even talked about yet, alongside of the time of day allowing for more variety in various areas. As it stands right now, the Johto specific stuff are really holding the games back, meanwhile the more general mechanical improvements are at least lifting the games up in a bit of a weird balancing act, until we reach the playthrough that is. But as for now, the Gen 1 battle system got a crazy makeover we gotta dive into. With a massive step upwards despite some growing pains, we receive probably the biggest mechanical overhaul the series has ever seen. And that's not even talking weird move interactions like grabbing moves, the 1 in 256 chance to miss, and so much more. Where else to start but the most impactful change Gen 2 provides with the special stat split. Where Gen 1 only had 5 distinct stats with lopsided balance, Gen 2 rips apart the biggest balancing fumble by making it 6. Where in Gen 1 physical attacks collided with the foe's defense for damage calcs, the special stat was just bouncing off the foe's special stat. Yes, one stat into the foe's same one stat, essentially being 2 stats in 1, which makes plenty of issues when boosting just 1 does 2. Now every Pokemon has special attack and special defense as 2 different stats, mirroring that of the physical moves, meaning, hey look, Amnesia isn't a double calm mind anymore. And now with the 2 stats separate, we have at least an illusion of balancing for some much less lopsided gameplay. This does come with some funny oddities though. For the Gen 1 mons in particular, this can actually alter how they play quite a bit, as not everyone got the Mew treatment of keep keeping their special stats the same between the two generations, as most mons kept their special stat but only on one of the two stats, receiving something new in the other. For multiple examples, we see a new special attack buffing mons like Charizard, Nidoking, and Jinx, while the new special attack stats nerf the likes of Gyarados, Articuno, and Chansey. On the other hand, new special defense stats make the likes of Machamp, Hitmonlee, and obviously the Gen 2 King Snorlax more ironclad defensively, while new SpDef stats make titans like Gengar, Alakazam, and Mewtwo more manageable to punch holes through. Overall, a very needed change that defines the generation. Honestly, potentially a top 3 change in the entire series. One that's definitely taken for granted, as now we've reached a much more needed balance. After all, did Mewtwo really need 154 on both of its specials? Yes, of course it did, but Game Freak are cowards that take nice things from us. So, specially nerfed it is, and we're just gonna have to take this as a good settlement. Alongside the stat rebalancing, speed receives a minor alteration as well, as higher or lower speed stats will no longer alter critical hit rates. Where previously slower mons got less crits and faster mons scored more crits, alongside the potential of guaranteed crits through the higher crit rate attacks. Now the standard crit rate's a measly 1 in 16, with high crit rate attacks being about 1 in 8, and other similar boosts varying. With more Gen 1 jank out of the way, crits will actually now acknowledge your attack stat boosts instead of just ignoring them, no longer holding you back on KO ranges. You know, a Scyther boosting with Swords Dance just to crit and miss the KO, being a very well needed fix because the really lucky system that rewards the player for landing it shouldn't actually be a detriment to the player. With mechanics specifically targeting mons in mind, the concept of genders finally descend on the game. It's a neat little indicator that is picked by RNG when the mon is created. This does not really affect too much in battle, as some interactions do exist through an attack like Attract, but most means simply yet do not exist in Gen 2, meaning the main purpose of this edition for now is going to be a side feature that we can forget about at this point in time. Friendship ends up as another background feature that's typically forgotten about most of the time, as this is a hidden number with perks attached. Again, like the last feature, most use cases do not exist yet, although evolution ends up being one case for a handful of mons alongside a few attacks in terms of calculating damage. The invisible number attached goes up through a handful of arbitrary tasks, such as gaining some from the likes of leveling up and walking around the world, losing some whenever the mon is knocked out. While it seems simple, raising these numbers here in Gen 2 is a lengthy uphill battle that really only demands your time. And how that grind impacts the game, we will see later. Hint hint, nudge nudge. Up next, the DV system comes back to lurk its ugly head around the corner, as the prototype IV system gets 2 silly quirks coming into GSC, both of which aren't very good. So hear me out. What if in our randomly generated bonus stat line, we added an attack that bases not only its damage on its DVs, but even its damn typing? What this grants us is a horrible mix of potentially the perfect attack to fill any moveset, but only in a hypothetical world. In a world where RNG can decide the 2 most important parts of an attack, determined when the Pokemon shows up, it's in practical terms, a damn near impossible factor to have any say-so in without egregious determination and grinding just to get either the perfect fit, let's say Zapdos or Raikou with HP Ice, patching up a potential learn set issue, or say Hidden Power Bug or Scale and Scizor, hoping to fix Mr. No Good stab moves. This serves as what's supposed to be yet another means to make each and every mon unique. What it ends up being is just another lengthy spat of nonsensical hurdles with difficult to control factors in order to milk out the best of the best, something you, when battling your friends, will probably want to have. However, DVs cannot stop there, as their influence plagues even more of the game, this time through shiny Pokemon, as these guys are stupidly rare color palette swaps of mons that serve no extra gameplay purpose, alongside being both cool, rare, and sadly, thanks to its animation, speedrun killers. It's a sick addition, it's just a shame in Gen 2 it's got a downside, as for a shiny to appear, it's not as simple as a 1 in 95, a 1 in 115, or even a 1 in 4096, because a mon's shininess is determined on their DVs here. What we end up getting is guaranteed 10s across 4 of their stats, with HP and attack being more up in the air, where of course the cap is 15 on any stat. If it's not obvious, these Pokemon, in a competitive sense, are complete liabilities, doomed to never be peak, only ever decent. On a similar note, the unknown forms are also determined on a DV basis, which explains why certain letters always have a small pool of types, alongside why 2 of these forms can ever be shiny. Thankfully, that's all in terms of DVs. It's a shame though the idea of a stupid luck factor isn't out of the picture yet, because apparently Pokerus was introduced to these games somehow being even more of a rare pickup than shiny Pokemon are. This line of text, while present, doubles all EVs earned, which in the Gen 1 and 2 EV meta is nothing short of a good thing whenever it appears in the wild. Outside of random encounters, you're only getting it from mons that already have the status, just for it to fade for a while after being forgotten about, being actually a pretty damn nice addition. Sadly though, one you'll you'll almost completely forget about entirely. Although, who needs forgettable changes when we have some of the most impactful ones in Pokemon history? Like the type chart rebalancing that's probably more of a big deal than the special stat changes. As here, we got 2 brand new typings and an attempted fixing of the Gen 1 type chart. With the adjustments being Psychic now having a crippling fear of ghosts rather than being immune to them, Fires or for some reason unfazed by ice moves now, and for game balancing, both changes are good. Now, the Bug and Poison typings being neutered to Oblivion by no longer being super effective against each other is one questionable decision. Listen, Poison only needs to be super effective against grass, you don't see the vision. Doubly so when the new best type is just completely immune to them, as Gold and Silver delivers us 2 new additions with the Steel and Dark types. In an effort to address how busted the normal Psychics were in Gen 1, Steel was added to resist both of them, alongside 8 other typings entirely to be undoubtedly the best in the entire game. Because who even needs offense? Dark, on the other hand, is just weird, defensively immune to Psychic to put them halfway in the grave. Meanwhile, with an offensive spread that just hits the 2 same types super effectively, that Ghost does. Really only featuring mix-ups in resists and neutrals, generally being a pretty damn good type. Just again, lacking decent offensive attacks in this gen in particular. In that, gamers, was Game Freak attempting to fix the type chart despite failing to address about half the types whatsoever. But here's a good question: why should we leave it at typings when even status conditions join the fray of getting fixed? From most impactful to least impactful, Freeze now has a natural defrost chance in order to remove itself from play, being complete luck as it's a pathetic 20% chance to remove at the end of a turn. In GSC's case, it's actually 10%, meaning yes, it still hypothetically can be an auto KO should the cold ever hit, which is a yes, it's still probably the best status condition, especially as Sleep was nerfed now, allowing for the sleeping Pokemon to act the turn they wake up on. Meaning gamers, guess what? Perma-sleep loops aren't a thing anymore. Just in time for Smeargle to come in and spore everything non-stop. Is what I would say if in a competitive sense, it didn't end up in way too many scenarios turn out to be a bit of a good thing. Granted though, that only comes down to how 2 very specific attacks interact. Particularly Rest, resetting its 3-turn sleep, used to be infinitely cycled with Sleep Talk. Essentially killing damn near all progress and damage or primary statuses that you may have applied. Essentially a reset to 0 that could keep the loop going. While such Sleep Talk mechanics are a bit annoying to deal with, they oddly enough kind of end up being a good thing. You know, demanding a higher skill level to navigate ends up making playing around this nonsense very rewarding to do. If not, it makes it the most skill rewarding generation probably of all of them, in terms of PvP. Anyways, enough of a competitive detour. Where's my burn status in Gen 2? Oh right, it's packing double the passive damage. Yeah, from now through Gen 6, we're nuking 1/8 of your health bar instead of 1/16, like sandstorm damage or something. Which, whoa, no way. Weather is now a thing that exists. Much like we'll see with terrains later in Gen 6 and 7, we've got 3 here with sun, rain, and sand as new field effects, providing a trait for several turns with various effects while they last. The issue of it being like Gen 6 terrains is because you can only set the weather manually, with the 4th weather being missing entirely. And here, there's not too many mons, to a lesser extent many attacks really, to take advantage of the weather, just leaving them as a concept for Gen 3 later to run with. Also, while looking at features for strategic play, entry hazards exist now. It's cool for prolonged games, despite potentially being a liability for shorter ones. Although for us, it's just an irrelevant footnote to leave in the dirt. But hey gamers, now it's time for the 3rd biggest thing Gen 2 did in bettering gameplay, with the addition of held items. Okay, so get this. These are held items that aren't used, in some cases are, straight out of the bag, but rather serve as an equipable tool to be used passively or automatically if certain conditions are met, to provide various effects. This, similar to moveset diversity, opens up the way a mon can play far more, through extra damage, HP healing, status restoration, stuff of that sort. Once again, another place that cannot be understated in how impactful and generally good the addition is. It's just a shame that in Gen 2 in particular, the item variety is kind of bad, with how difficult some items can be to get, like a Miracle Berry, the Bright Powder, or the Light Ball. What could be easily obtained like the Amulet Coin does not provide actual battle impacts. The EXP share can surely make leveling easier, but not much else. The many damage boosting items only offer a pathetic 1.1x boost, barely being noticeable at times. This reverse arms race called items trying to be useless in battle only really leaves a handful of items to be good generally speaking, especially in the in-game playthrough sense because the item variety is very limited. Although in a competitive sense, only 2 of the items genuinely end up being great, with everything else either being gimmicks or just a liability. We have the Thick Club and the leftovers that soar above everything else. One Set It and Reap the Rewards of Healing, and the Mon Attack exclusive Doubler. Yes gamers, everyone is pissing in the pool except Marowak, and it's a bit of a problem specifically here. There's just simply not enough items. Obviously lacking stuff like the Choice Band, the Life Orb, the Rocky Helmet, the Assault Vest, you get the picture. For a playthrough, the lacking variety is honestly kind of fine, you just wish they'd be more common. Just taking it to a PvP environment environment where the issues roll in. Again, a great addition, it's just a mid-implementation, only really in this game. Going even further, we glance at catching now. For the most part, you're still slinging your balls around. The difference is two things: a faster means in which to move mons back and forth through the boxes, which, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. This didn't address the one big problem of the game gatekeeping your catches, sabotaging your encounters, because you don't need more mons. But the other catching thing that we gotta see is just a raw negative. So yeah, you remember how Pokemon could flee in the Safari Zone in Gen 1? Just in a completely contained environment? Yeah, now certain mons can just do that whenever, making the act of failing a ball be mildly annoying at best and utterly disastrous at worst, just because of a flight response like this. Only works in isolation, which this game lacks entirely, as there's not even a Safari Zone. Although isolation technically does exist with the roaming Pokemon feature. Here is an alternative encounter method for legendaries that functions differently and is really one of those ideas that's only good on concept but not in execution, as here, select groups of mons will be released into the wild when interacted with. Doing so will decide the Pokemon's IVs right then and there, which, like that, the mons will travel on and off routes as you hope to the RNG gods to find them, as trying to track them down with the map is just complete bait, as they'll also end up moving between routes and sounds as you do, especially so when you try to fly. When you actually do end up battling one of these mons, they'll flee instantly, starting the chase yet again, maintaining all damage and status conditions, with the latter being untrue in Gen 2 in particular. So you either gotta outrun them to stick some damage, trap them on the field, or just chunk balls at them and hope for the best. See, the feature works as a concept because it's just a continuous rewarding goal to work towards over time. The execution blunder, of course, comes with the complete nonsense back and forth that is just hoping any of the three in this game's case to just show up, as rare or time consuming as that may be, obviously being a complete waste of our valuable time. Trying to grind this out is completely miserable. I'm glad I wasted 30 minutes doing this just to have to create bullshit footage for you to watch that I never got. Like, man, this feature is so miserable, I would rather do PLA filler content, man. Come on. Finally though, that leaves us with a completely forgotten feature, being the badge boosts. While the whole get a specific badge for a passive boost thing is still present from Gen 1, the reason we're here is because it was added onto, because now we get an additional damage boost whenever a badge is earned, tied to the typing that the gym was themed on, meaning, oh boy, your solo play just gets even easier as 16 of the game's typings get even stronger after beating their respective gym, as an even sweeter reward. Yeah, sorry to the dark types, Elbozo, you should have just been better. If there's any flaw here, it's just one typing being left out. Which, gamers, that does it for Gen 2's mechanical end. Massive couldn't even begin to paint the image on how much the battle scene had improved, being the single most important generational shift that we've ever had. Oh boy, it's actually time to play through the game, and this is where the criticism goes full force, almost feeling like vitriol. To see that in action, look no further than the Mons lineup. Here we get 100 brand new Mons, courtesy of Gen 2, for a grand total of 251 throughout the entire game. Zooming our focus towards Johto alone, the count is much lower, because of course Kanto needs to have content too. So when we dig through the Pokedex with somehow perfect counting abilities, looking at Gold and Silver specifically because Crystal weirdens things up a lot, we're left with a whopping total of 188 mons for you to consider using throughout the main bulk of the game. Important to note that we're only looking at the obtainables here, and there are a lot of things wrong with this count. The type diversity just has massive imbalances, evolution items having a drought that makes a handful of evolutions just impossible to get until after the champion is beat, Pokemon introduced in Johto just refuse to live in their native region, and lastly, some mons are just completely impossible to get in Gen 2. So first, the typing issues. We've got roughly 7 types fumbling at hitting a usable count of 5, our benchmark for the bare minimum, in type diversity during the Johto run. Dragon only hits 2 fully evolved dragons because, well, that's all that exists. There's really not much that could have been done. Ghost only hits 1 of its 2 with the reasoning of just because. Dark, despite the region introducing 5 of them, that's all there is, only 1 of them is ever usable during Johto. Excluding legendaries, Fire and Electric will hardly make the cut, especially with Fire's version exclusives on the table. Ice ends up falling at 4 for the same reason, but at least Silver players actually can get the 5th, which will just leave us with Steel at 3, but actually 5 if you're willing to fish for the item chances on Wild Magnemite, something that most would rather wait until Kanto to only get 1 copy of. 7 out of our 17 typings stumble and try to get back up. Meanwhile, typings like Normal, Water, and Flying are absolutely feasting in their Pokemon count, 21, 22, and 21 respectively. Variety like this is grim and hardly lives up to the term. However, in terms of stepping on our toes, forcing unevolved mons on us longer, in fact far too long, we've got the issues with Pokemon not evolving in a reasonable time frame. In modern day, we've seen evolutions locked very far into the game. Say Glaceon and Sinnoh, Crabominable and Sun and Moon, or even some very late evolutions like Dragonite in these games. Notice how all of these are examples of mons that are possible to get during the main game before the champion is beat, right? Yeah, so our problem here is that certain evolution items just end up being completely absent from your gym challenge run. Yes, the Thunder, Fire, Water, and Leaf Stones, plus maybe the Metal Coat if you're reasonable, are all stuck in Kanto. The latter being given to you with story progress, again, renewable with Magnemite, with the others being earnable once through optional content and never again. Hell yeah, gamers, we're playing Pokemon Catch 1, but no more. Well, that's a bit of an over-exaggeration. The fact that you're expected to, let's say, if you want to use Exeggutor through the game, you're forced to use its pitiful pre-evolution from the time of getting it, in this case after the second gym, and use it all the way through the Pokemon League and more before finally getting the only stone in the game. Already clearing the game's main challenge, dealing with the headaches of babysitting a liability of a teammate, while also locking you out of another Leaf Stone evolution like Vileplume or Victory Bell. And again, it's not just limited to one stone. There are 12 potential mons that you would want to use these kind of evolution stones on, and 11 of them just end up suffering across Johto in particular. Thank you, Pikachu, for being absent from Johto. Imagine wanting to use a Pokemon and then the game just telling you no. Again, not only does this limit your variety, but it's going to kill your collection long term, and they are completely unrenewable unless you're in Crystal specifically, which, oh boy, that's its own can of worms. Pushing forward with our Dex issues is the total Johto eviction. You've heard it 1 billion times, but when we wrap around to the gym leader teams, it'll be so again. But with a new region, we gotta do something in order to give it a sense of identity, and letting you use loads of new mons sure as hell is the easiest way to do so. So when you realize 18 entire Pokemon are just locked until after the Pokemon League is beat, things just seem off. Okay, sure, Kanto needs content once it's opened up, but actually no. Kanto already has 28 Kanto locked Kanto mons. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the region is just really greedy apparently, and for some reason shifting the part 1 supply over with the part 2 supply was just too hard and a dumb hypothetical, so we get a bit of a mess here. The Super Rod is one thing, as it's just 3 mons that are technically in Johto. Mount Silver is the final dungeon. It'd be weird if a single Johto mon or evolution line wasn't here in the final area, but for some reason we get 3 full lines here, where multiple other mons in other areas are just scattered about Kanto. And like we saw with the type variety issue moments ago, it'd be nice to just have a dark type on your team without sacrificing your Eevee, similar to how you're sacrificing your 1 evolution stone. But physically, you can't use other dark types. Look, it's very important that Murkrow and Houndour are found on the same route. Like, look man, we're playing the Johto games because we want to use the Johto mons. We don't want to use Gengar for 2 gens in a row despite a new ghost existing now. And in some circumstances, it goes past using Mischievous yourself, but the fact that no trainer ends up battling you with one. But you know what, sure, let's just zoom out of the Pokedex lineup. How can we organize these between Johto and Kanto real quick? You know, make the numbers a little bit more tangible. Looking at what is usable in Johto, we have 83 of the 99 Johto mons, alongside 102 of 150 Kanto mons, if the math was done right. In our new region, there's already a majority of returning mons in a different region than the one they debuted in, where that region is also in these games. Right there, the Kanto 2 allegations are riding high, and that's just because of how noticeable it can be in gameplay at times. That's where things get both better and worse. When we start looking more at teams, let's say the Rocket admins, we see a few unavailable mons with like Murkrow and the dogs laying around. The rival even has Cecil showing up, but that's just really where it stops. The Elite Four stubs their toe a little. Will has 1 Johto mon twice. Koga walks a decent line with 3. Karen ends up with the same. Bruto's team are damn near a copy and paste with the Gen 1 team, only having a single Johto model now. And then there's Lance, who has no Johto Pokemon, yet 3 dupes for dragons because stealing the other dragon from Claire was just too much. She needs to have her own identity or something. The gym leaders, good lord, they were on drugs, as only half of them even have 1 mon from their region. Falconer, despite 12 new birds existing, only just has 2 Kanto birds from the same evolution line because stealing the ace of a generic optional trainer would have just been too much at this point. Bugsy, despite 6 new lines, 2 of them are bad, which would have perfectly fit onto Bugsy's team. I mean, it's replacing literal dead weight. It's a perfect fit. Chuck returns with 2 Kanto mons only, one of which you can't even have in Johto because if he had one of the 2 new mons, Bruno wouldn't be unique anymore. Yes, gamers, Heracross is just a myth. Then there's just the egregious one with Morty. Remember how there's only 1 new ghost? Good, because now I'm going to walk you through the gym and see if you can find him. Spoilers, I already said it doesn't exist, so try to keep up. Gym Trainer 1, Ghastly 1, Ghastly 2, Ghastly 3, Ghastly 4, and of course Ghastly 5. Gym Trainer 2, Haunter 1, Haunter 2. Gym Trainer 3, Haunter 3. Gym Trainer 4, Ghastly 6, Ghastly 7, Haunter 4. Morty himself, Gengar, Ghastly 8, Haunter 5, and Haunter 6. Oh yeah, did you blink during that? No, of course not. There's no Missy here anywhere, despite not being saved for an important trainer later on. Look, I know some of y'all are bothered by how superstitious this damn near irrelevant point is, like on the same vein as like the all monotype team or bust arguments for gym leaders. But it wouldn't be that big of an issue if the game itself wasn't valuing it so much, whether it's the mods originating where, or how much of the first 5 gens where it's actually possible for the majority to be new during the main game. This one is somehow the only game that failed to post up in that regard. Hoenn is dominated by a Hoenn majority. Sinnoh, despite fumbling a lot, has a Sinnoh majority. And then Unova, I don't even have to explain that one. At every corner of Monzing, Johto just wants to beat Kanto a second time. The only issue with identity is the 4th point of this deck's crisis being the unobtainables, but it's not that big of a deal. With the old legendaries out of the picture alongside the fossils and even the old starters. The only problem with this is that in Gen 2 specifically, you can't get them at all, demanding Gen 1 transfers to make it even possible in the first place. That's it. 4 reasons of varying volatility as to why they dampen the team building experience, and what sucks is that's not even the end of it. But we have to hold on to that for now. That's the worst part. We need to navigate this dumb region before we can even get to the leveling section, as this is a place where the first third of the region is a hyperlinear loop, being super straightforward with almost nothing for detours, even with a skippable catching tutorial to boot. We end up with a mid-game featuring the infamously valuable freedom of choice, do anything you want when you want garbage that the existence of a level curve ends up destroying the value and impact of. And another straightforward endgame with a few optional detours you'll likely ignore because exploring is optional straight to the end of the main game. Outside of level curve related nonsense, the 2 linear sections are fine. However, the non-linear stretch of Ekritik up to the radio tower plot kinda just sucks. The issue comes as not only is this freedom of choice just short-lived, hardly giving you the satisfaction of the choice, especially as at any point you can just say screw it and leave your chosen path whenever to do the other side and just bounce between the two. Who really needs commitment when pulling out is always optimal, courtesy of leveling being an integral feature of the game. You're always making progress, which of course it's also not really helped by half the wild encounters in this area just being available before even fighting Morty himself. But the big fatal part of this all is how this is where the level curve gets sent to the dogs and progression is nothing short of a meal that you'll want to turn down, as the final nail of the team building kinda sucks in this game coffin. From the beginning, you obviously deal with level 5 starts, and the first 3 rounds are packed with wild mons 2 to 4, and trainers in the range of 2 to 4. Most of optional tower is packed with level 3 trainers before each strange jump to 6s, even reaching a high as 10 by the end with wild mons from 3 to 6. Faulkner's gym just copies his own levels of 7 and 9 across the entire thing. Yes, our first boss fight is already slacking in levels compared to optional content, and for some reason is also capped in single digits with only 5 battles forced by the time you've even gotten the first batch. The wild mons across the Azalea split are essentially 4 to 8 across the board. Meanwhile, Rival 2 and Bugsy want your team to be double that with caps of 16 each, something that one mon can easily do, but certainly not half of a team at this point. And now with the 16s down, Route 34 and the Goldenrod Tunnel as the only content between badges 2 and 3, see the wild mons and regular trainers at 10 to 13. Meanwhile, Whitney just caps at a big 20. Meanwhile, we're seeing levels as low as 10 for some reason. The gap to Ekritik is crawling with 15s until the final route surpasses them with wild mons not far behind. The optional Rival crawls up to 22. The Kimono girls here only packing 1 mon for some reason don't get any notable level buff that the normal 1 mon trainers get, only being 17. Then the gym sees a low of 16 for an average of 20, with a high of 25 at the end for Morty's team, where wild mons are struggling by 8 to 10 levels to even keep up, wanting a grind when you finally decide to pick them up. And now gamers, the open-ended nature comes in to bring the game to a screeching halt, as you have to be able to go either left or right out of Ekritik without feeling suffocating, but enough to not be a complete cakewalk when coming back after doing one of the 2 paths. It fails at doing that last part. Going left, we see wild mons from lows of 13 to 17, with trainers rocking 17s to 20s, all the way through the lighthouse. The water routes even have wild mons over-level the trainers, who offer 17s to 23s, with 20s the average across the routes. Meanwhile, the wilds hit a range of 15 to 24, just in time for the gym, averaged to 25 with several 27s featuring Chuck's jump to 30, where you are expected to just turn around and instantly take on Jasmine in her 30s and 35. Remember, XP gain across the mid-game is completely atrocious with spam of unevolved mons and level gaps from what you're trying to keep up with. with. And it's about to get a whole hell of a lot worse, as now with this side beaten, we've got to go to the other end of the line for a factory reset of any leveling pacing that we've had since Ekruti. Wild Mons from 13 to 17, up to the Lake of Rage, where only a single Mon ever passes 20, where the lake itself has mid-20 trainers, and a guaranteed level 30 just waiting for you, so the Rocket Hideout Mons can cap at a measly 23, where the Rocket Grunts can't even surpass 20, where the admins and scientists have to pick up the slack, but only really to 25, a number that you're completely wiping the mud off your shoes with. The gym averages 24 to 28 for price to stand with a 31. XP starved from all the hideout junk encounters, where Gym 7 just can't even pass Gym 6 level-wise, despite having a more mandatory trainers. But now the freedom of choice is dead, so surely we're gonna pick up right at the 30s to start the late game, right? No, the radio tower needs its level 21 rats alongside the other leveled mess of Mons this place is packing, where only the Porygon guy, the rival, and the admins can ever reach 30 or past it. But to add insult to injury, only one ever passes Jasmine, and it's not even the final admin in this area, where all the trainer spam can't even properly ramp up in levels as you progress through the 3 acts of this area, where the Goldenrod Underground does not even know where progression is whatsoever, as among the 9 required normal trainers do not even bother pressing 30, much less attempting to pass it, with the 10th battle being the rival is the only exception, and that's a very noticeable problem, as you beat this 32, and then everything just jumps below for no reason, just for you to go to the 3rd act of the radio tower climb, and then instantly get hit with whiplash and levels. It's just so stupid. But as for now, you're done. Here you can go snag a level 40, something that the legendary beast already allowed available much sooner. Now, you just don't have the tedious part to roll into Route 44, where the trainer average just copies the radio tower's homework, minus any boss fights, so there's no progress. The same is true for the ice path with level 21 to 24 wild Mons, where the trainers on a good day were during the route split. It's fine though, Blackthorn is ready to spam mid to high 30s at you to cap at 40, where at this point your team of 6 is splitting XP in far too many directions to keep up with, despite this entire mid game being built to keep your Mons higher level. God forbid your ice path catch that is 15 levels behind even tries to come out to play, where Route 45, God bless its soul, has no trainers even reaching 30 with wild Mons around the 25 average. And with that leveling issue, we get to see a fun instance of, oh, this Pokemon can't be its proper level, but we've already got 8 gym badges by this point. You have to have this Mon fully evolved really early, or you could have had a decent level curve and this Pidgeot could have been reasonably leveled. Really cool. Rare Gamers, congrats. You're off to Kanto now for the end game. The wild Mons finally begin to crawl into the 30s, while most of the trainers still can't even pass Jasmine's Steelix in levels. Not at all in Route 27's case, and barely in 26's case. And now, you're at Victory Road, where the wild Mons average 35. Okay, so they caught up to the trainers, where the final rival battle only averages the best of what the wild Mons have to offer, capped at 38. Yes, gamers, this boss fight is not even beating out Claire in levels. But don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, we have more disaster approaching, with more Elite 4 level laddering to deal with, as each of the 4 members, right into the champs, see a low of 40, and then slowly ramp into the final Mon levels for a max of 50, where the ramping sags in the middle end, where for some reason, we see some 42s on the final Elite 4 members team. Why? But yeah, a 10 level gap from start to finish isn't the greatest, because of course that's a wide level range that grinding can trivialize most of the battles of, or not grinding will needlessly inflate the challenge of, because you don't want everything up to Lance to be a pushover. All this level hand-holding just to paint the annoyance that the level curve actually is. And this is ignoring the complete train wreck of the Kanto arc. We haven't even gotten that far yet, and it's gonna get worse. The game just rushes into the first act, having far too little mandatory trainers throughout, where Falkner gets to have his single-digit ace Pokemon, where we also have random points where wild encounters will take on trainer teams and levels before getting left in the dust entirely, where we look at the mid-game where things stagnate pretty badly, or the late game where the grinding options are just bad. The first half of the late game is completely miserable to play through and completely free, devoid of any challenge. All these issues trickle down into why team building is a complete pain in GSC. 2 regions alone brings massive time gating issues where late game isn't the only problem, as post game is on the table with that 2-act structure. The place where multiple new Pokemon are, Mons that you will want to use. Of course, the post game delight of evolution stones are troublesome. Friendship game just ends up being far too inconvenient that almost makes these Mons feel like Kanto pickups despite being possible in Johto. The day-night cycle demanding you to sit around and wait for the encounter pool to eventually shift around, alongside potential day of the week events. Certain Mons just deciding to flee. Maybe it's the chore of chasing roamers. The full full reset button of trying to get an egg move, something we've not even mentioned yet. The EXP system making all the low-level mons everywhere even more detrimental, not only making them an immediate chore to train up should you catch them, but even less desirable to grind against. All before the team building issues that affect most games, like the need to slot in HMs sacrificing team move slots, even if it's now temporary, not having friends for trade evolutions or version exclusives, before the lesser shortcomings that you hold personal, like bad movesets or unusable stats courtesy of attack categories and typings that make mons really undesirable to use because they're very weak. It's why previously I threw up the dumb meme about the 3-mon team and your HM employees, because it's an over-exaggeration of all these team building issues coming together despite having these drawbacks in the haha only Diamond and Pearl team meme format. Yeah, your options suck in so many areas and the XP system doesn't work in your favor if you go past 3 team members. It's just painful. If it was just this alone, yeah, maybe playing through the game could be aggravating through Johto. However, we gotta look at the team quality throughout the game, and ignoring the no Johto problem, these games unfortunately have a spamming problem of the same mons non-stop. Their biggest culprit of these problems come into like Rattata, Zubats, and Coughing alongside their evolutions, primarily at the hands of Team Rocket, where among all their story moments, the big 3 get a total of 15 bats, 24 rats, and 21 smog machines, ignoring any generic trainers like youngsters or other important trainers like Koga, Janine, or the rival, just because this game needs to be repetitive. Remember, this is just the Slowpoke Well, the Goldenrod Underground, the Radio Tower, and the Rocket Hideout. These are just 4 areas, 24 Rattatas. Although if we're gonna look at other team building flaws, it comes to enemy teams with the gym leaders. In Bugsy's case, it's just the useless Metapod and Kakuna just being liabilities, mentioned already, alongside Morty, Jasmine, and Claire having duplicates, which is bad, with that last one having 3 for some reason. Price just simply lacks a full monotype team, something 3 of the Elite 4 members pull off, with Bruno, Koga only having 1 exception to their rule while Karen has 2, or finally that leaves Lance to be the wackiest of them all, having 3 of the exact same Pokemon, one of which is his damn ace, the most important mon on his team. And weirdly enough, in a case of the devs probably forgetting to check movesets, the Aerodactyl does have access to an attack that it just cannot get normally. But gamers, that's all as far as Johto is concerned. So ladies and gentlemen, with us in our grave, it's time for the ghost of Kanto Pass to just chuck us in the middle of the ocean as we accept our fate with this game being a complete critical disaster. It is just dumbfounding how Johto was a low point and it's still not even the worst part of it yet. No, gamers. Kanto pulled out of the retirement home to be kicked around and made fun of because, good lord, they dropped the ball pretty badly with this attempt at the region. When it comes to our Mons lineup, we're able to pick up most of the scraps in terms of Johto's inaccessible Mons. Essentially, unless it's one of those transfer-only Mons or the Mythicals, they're usable. This brings up our grand total to 232 fetchable friends between the 2 games. Now that's stuff like the Kanto locked evolution stone and other team building nonsense being dealt with, meaning now most of our type variety issues are also dealt with. Ice hits 5, both electric and fire also hit 5, dark even hits it, although sadly that's at the final dungeon in the game. Again, dragon and ghost are stuck in this purgatory called no options because they simply just don't exist yet. Now that means we've fixed most of the Mons diversity issues, so now it's time to use Kanto as tissues, as playing through it a second time is nothing short of novelty because the experience is pitiful if not insulting. So let's just start off small but impactful with navigation. Starting off after the credits, you take a simple boat ride and ta-da, you're in the region you actually like. And here you do 2 things. You battle all 8 of the Kanto gym leaders in any order you like, and along the way, deal with the plot at the power plant to access the west side of Kanto to finish the first quest, where you, with all 16 badges, head off to Silver Cave for the final challenge. Simple. The issues include the Seafoam Islands route just not being an alternative path towards Cinnabar. Alongside that, pick anywhere freedom of choice nonsense. But most importantly, it's an what am I even supposed to do here moment with the Snorlax. As here, you're expected to get the radio card, which, because we're not looking at the remakes, up to this point was completely skippable. For first-time players to know they have to talk to some random NPC, but it can't be during the only time you're here in the game, just to be expected to have it in Kanto, while also running off to what appears to be a completely optional town just to get an upgrade for the radio card, just to be forced to use it as a one-off feature to progress the plot. Also why you're stuck. This is a relic of the past in game design and it's bad. You're gonna feel really stupid stupid when you have to finally Google the solution to even progress forward, because the game said literally nothing about it. Luckily for us, that's basically it for navigation issues. It's just overwhelming, where do I want to go right now, and Snorlax. That's it. The only real problem is something that can be easily replicated in multiple playthroughs. Of course, only hindering first-time players. So far, everything's okay. But now it's time for the level curve, and the non-linearity just feeling like someone throwing mud in your face when it should be the highlight of the adventure. And here, it is the level curve's fault. It's not even a case of mainly the level curve's fault, it just is. Just take the first battles in Kanto, for instance. Right after dealing with the Pokemon League's gauntlets of 40s pluses, capping at 50, you know how far back we have to regress on the SS Aqua? Straight down to the low 30s, even featuring a 20 range Mon on a forced battle. Moving into Vermilion City, the surfing encounters have a net of 30 to 39 levels. Meanwhile, no gym trainers even surpass that, where they only compete with those levels, or they're just the random Magnemite in the 20s. Meanwhile, Surge level-wise has a few 40s, capped to 46. So our first gym leader has done nothing in terms of trying to surpass the champ's cap, and it's a horrible trend you better get used to. Heading north to the rest of the region, we see grass and water encounters, packed with mid-10s, and in Gold and Silver's case, no trainers to speak of. In Saffron's gym, it's just mid-30s again, and Sabrina's team that are all upper 40s, again, not surpassing the champion despite coming after the champion progression-wise. Leaving the town in any of the three directions, it's either mid or upper 10s for wild Pokemon. Meanwhile, Route 8 for trainers is still packing low 30s. Say it with me again. Erica's gym has low to mid-30 trainers, just for her to come in with mid-40s. Crazy how we're progressing in the region, yet the level curve isn't. Surely it's just a weird coincidence, but no, actually it's not. As Misty does the same thing again, with mid-30 trainers to a mid-40s team, despite requiring more trainers, and as well as the plotline to even reach. With Route 25 and Route 9 still bleeding out with low 30 trainers going nowhere. Heading towards Fuchsia, it's still happening. Back at it again with the low 30s trainers, but at least the wild mons are up to high 20s, where we reach the pinnacle of level Cinery with Janine's gym, considering again, low mid-30s level trainers, just for the boss trainer that you had to progress out of your way towards, past 3 gyms to even reach, mind you. Regresses past the 40s with a 39 cap and several 36s that are on par with the gym trainers, with a 33 eclipsed by them, the whole Elite Four, and even Claire. But oh wait, she's supposed to be an Elite Four member's less experienced daughter, so she has to be weaker than the rest of them. No! What works as an idea can easily fumble in execution and should be put down on the drawing board, where playing with levels like this is not a good solution. A lower quality team works. A team with 3 or 2 move slots per Mon works. Both of these fit the idea, but what we have is pathetic. But this gives us a battle that, like every Kanto leader so far, is completely free and a complete non-challenge. But to an even greater extent, it's actually more of an accomplishment to lose this fight, which again, you had to cross half the region to even get here, just to see the levels regress. Heading east out of Fuchsia, it's the same. We have mid to high 20s on wilds, mid to low 30s, even high 20s on trainers, or whatever this level 23 Pikachu team is supposed to be. Remember, this is on routes that are packed with battles that need you to battle through other routes to even reach where the Super Rods encounters, which is something you unlock here, by the way, will eclipse all the trainers in level. But gamers, now that the power plant is dealt with for plot, surely the level curve progresses, right? Oh, you said yes, well, it's because you're thinking right now. Something Game Freak didn't do, so you're wrong, buddy. Mount Moon and Route 3 are paved with single-digit level wild encounters, with more of the same mid-30s garbage on trainers, where the rival is also packing low 40s, eclipsed by gym leaders, where Pewter City proceeds to keep doing the same garbage, a mid-30s trainer with the low 40s boss. The path to Pallet Town is a complete disgrace. Levels as low as 2 on Wild Mon, and more mid-30s trainers, where the water routes pick up the slack a bit with wild encounters, where the grass at least averages high 20s again, with the water at least reaching the 30s. No, the trainers are still mid to low 30s. Again, even dipping their toes in the 20s, where Blaine, God bless the game, finally has a Mon that ties what Lance had at his best. A single Mon. Gentlemen, we have finally discovered an acceptable piece of leveling that should have been where Surge was, even if the rest of the team can't keep up. Where the last gym leader comes in, and what the hell is this? Mid to high 50s. Where has this been for the past 2 hours of gameplay? It's actual progression on a gym leader that you can battle thanks to the open-ended nature of Kanto before any of the other gym leaders. Like, damn straight I'm pulling up into Kanto, completely curve stomping blue, and then showing up and somehow wiping the Janine. I really need that confidence for the embarrassment that her team is. Just pathetic, dude. Finally, the Wild Mon mons near and inside the Silver Cave are progressing quite a bit. Low 40s, capped all the way to 51. At least someone wanted to give Lance a run for his money, which will feed us to the obscene level jump of Red, an 8-level gap of mid 70s to low 80s. So after 2 hours of running around and stomping every trainer and wild Pokemon without a shred of resistance, and only seeing 2 trainers since Lance that actually surpassed him level-wise, with one of these being this very fight, with an absolutely massive level jump of essentially 20 plus levels, while you've gotten nothing of value during this whole ride outside of a couple EVs. Yes, gamers, the final grinding session is finally among us, begging you to spend a week, potentially 2, as preparation for this battle, because you forget, this game is a part-time job, and you're not even getting paid to do it. All of this to finish the fight, and finally hit the real post-game for no additional content. From a completely pathetic level curve with 0 challenge across all wild mons and normal trainers, just for one battle that's fair, and one demanding you to drop and give it 20. This progression and general supply of challenge is completely laughable. It is funnier than anything you will see on YouTube today. Like, this needs to make a new word that surpasses a joke, genuinely. There's a reason I had to walk you through all the levels everywhere, because just saying broadly that the level curve sucks and hardly progresses doesn't do it justice, rather than seeing it all in action, for you to sit here and see how abysmal it truly is, to see and feel the lack of difficulty as wind on your face through the whole ride. If you can beat Lance to get here in the first place, all of these trainers being weaker than him are nothing short of obstacles in your way, made to be annoying rather than exciting, which says a lot when the open-ended nature provides next to nothing in terms of benefits. And that's just ignoring the wild Pokemon problems. You've beaten the game, and as reward, you can finally use the mons that you wanted earlier in the game, and now they are not horribly underleveled, but far worse. I'm talking cool. I got my Murkrow, time to grind it 30 levels to not only catch up to the rest of the team, but to also be able to fight in the next few gyms before grinding a second time just for Red. Yes, gamers, your reward for keeping your team open, finally hoping to use a dark type, maybe even an electric type, is 2 grinding sessions just to waste your precious time from frame 1 of getting these mons, similar to Johto's underleveled issue. The extreme taken here is just astonishing, serving way more to be a chore rather than some kind of reward. Hell yeah, brother. This level 20 Larvitar is going to carry the rest of the game. The rest of the game that in question is just the Red battle, wanting 50 whole levels just to play catch up. It is insane that this game ever released. Lastly, we get left with the quality of boss teams, and this is where it's mostly fine, since the levels are what's actually the problem. Brock's team is half good, half bad. Having 2 transfer-only mons are great, it's just a shame that the Rhyhorn and Graveler being unevolved is extremely questionable. Obviously, the Onix can't be evolved. That's why it stops being a full rock team. Misty's team is good, as the variety is fine. The only downside with Surge and Janine's teams are the duplicate Electrode and Weezing, especially as they have the same movesets as the first one. Erica, Sabrina, and Blaine all have fine teams. It's only weird that Blaine just doesn't have a 4th. Then there's Blue. Unlike the other gym leaders, not having a type-based team being the odd one out of the 16 total gym leaders. Ignoring the not monotype thing being a problem for the trainer whose badge is to give a ground type badge boost, here, his team is just strong and Pidgeot, with no gimmicks attached. It's a good challenge that shows why the whole monotype team is just nonsense, and Game Freak really should try to move away from it more. Again, it's not a problem if it becomes the rule, not the exception. Mount Moon Rivals struggles in terms of the team's attack offering, and the lack of Crobat just ends up being odd, although the weekly rematch team at least fixes that. Then finally Red, another well-balanced team. Its only questionable inclusion is the non-Kanto Pokemon on the team of the protagonist from the previous game. That's literally it. And there you have it, gamers. Your victory lap of gameplay is undoubtedly the worst of the 2 regions, bringing the Pokemon variety to essentially everything, minus a measly few. Shame getting the new mons at this point is a complete liability, rewarding you for not even bothering unless a save editor is there to bail you out. Traveling through the region is just miserable. Granted, the battle offering is of a bad quality and high quantity of obstacles, providing no challenge for you to reach. The area's boss trainers that also provide less challenge than content you've already beaten to even get there in the first place. It was one thing for Johto to be a complete chore to play, with trainer variety issues and low quality battle spam, levels, all this other nonsense, but hey, I can at least say one positive about Kanto, and that's the fact that it's pretty short, so it's easy to just blitz through, with the negatives being stains that sadly cannot be cleaned. And at this point, I don't even want to repeat myself anymore. All of this in an effort to somehow, against all odds, make the experience of a second entire region just an unfun slog that overstays its welcome the second you arrive with a bad time in tow. And with all the encounter pull nonsense at times, Kanto Kanto just feels like a net negative to the game, something the remakes actually took personally by making Kanto good enough. Instead of being the burrito that paints your toilet brown, it's just mostly a delight, and red again. And once the gate opens, showcasing the features, things seem great, but unfortunately that's just the light blinding you. Kicking that door open, it's this revolutionary concept of trainer rematches. Yes, gamers. The idea of doing content but a second time is how we start with two unique cases. Case 1 being the Rivals weekly rematches on Mondays and Wednesdays, only unlocked after the final encounter on Mount Moon. Here it's once a day, infinitely repeatable battles that at least give you something other than the E4 to run despite leveling being on par with Lance. Again, not even surpassing him despite your Kanto adventure. But our second rematch form comes down to normal trainers being able to take part as well, but only a few of them, just in a much more annoying manner thanks to the Poke Gear. This menu piece has several features, importantly being the phone book and the radio baked in. In an unrelated manner, excluding our forced need for the radio in the story, this thing is kinda just useless in Gold and Silver, the only real benefit being an alteration to encounter rates, which is what repels are for. The phoning ability is what we care about, as in Gold and Silver specifically, you're able to register specific trainers after beating them in battle, where one of two benefits are given. The lesser value boost is the addition of swarms, just being a means to bump up encounter rates on specific mons on the associated day. It's just a shame the boosted mons are technically always available, just much more common. The other more practical bonus is the trainer rematches though. Again, like with the swarms, you register a number in one of your precious 8 slots, deleting numbers if and when you need more. The rebattleable trainers over time get better but still bad teams, very underleveled. The battle against indefinitely just in an annoying manner, as you can wait for these trainers to call you for a rematch, or you can wait real life time, something that you, likely in modern day, can't spare for a small window of time to call the one individual trainer during your current time frame for a singular battle, but only in Pokemon Crystal apparently. Look, if you can scour the internet to find more definitive evidence on how this works, please be my guest, but it's not really readily available. I already tried. Why this well-intentioned inclusion feels like a waste of effort is, again, your time. The game trying to be a part-time job to even make the content accessible at all, and instead of you being able to just magically add on more hours to your day because we live in reality, you're stuck date skipping in most contexts to even attempt to play around with this feature. Or for cartridge players, where that's not an option, you're just expected to know that there's a very convoluted hidden system to manually change the clock. Yeah, that exists apparently. Regardless, what is added in immersion, which yes, there's quite a bit here, is also added in terms of headaches granted to the player in order for them to even make fun out of anything here. Listen gamers, you're not getting the call you want, you're getting another junk mail call. One that you can't even turn down. If that can't scratch your itchy back for time-locked content, maybe the bug catching contest will. Here on 3 specific days of the week, you can play a little catching game while you participate in an arms race to get a strong, healthy Pokemon, all against a timer that is extremely rigged, with some neat rewards like infinitely farmable sunstones. This giving you some kind of motivation as you catch the mons exclusively found here. But of course, there's one more bit of time-gated nonsense you forgot about entirely. No, the Haircut Brothers nor the lottery are worth even mentioning. Rather, the Mr. Ball Maker. With Kurt, all that's done here is you collecting acorns, that are also daily drops, mind you, to hand over so he can make you more exclusive balls to sling around for your catching needs after a day's time. Of course, like the rest of it, walled off through real-life hours that you're expected to just twiddle your thumbs during to hopefully never miss them. Moving towards far more impactful content that makes much more of a notable impact. For that, we begin with the Pokemon Daycare. This is yet another system with 2 main features baked in. The first is just what Gen 1 did better. Leave mons here, with every footstep you get bonus XP whenever the mon is gotten back. The bettering is now your ability to leave 2 mons here, so 2 mons can sit here and grind out EXP at the same time, although you'd probably rather just grind because it would be faster. Our second feature builds off of the 2 mon accessibility with breeding, as here, if certain conditions we'll get to are met, 2 mons that you leave for the daycare will leave eggs that hatch into one of the 2 parents. Essentially, for this to happen, your mon has to be in a matching egg group, which is a detail the game never explicitly states, where pretty much any legendary is disqualified, and they need to be opposite genders to spit an egg out, where you simply hatch the egg just by walking around with it in your party. Made pretty simple because the game already has an egg tutorial. What this allows you to do is easily get multiple copies of mons, especially ones that exist as one-offs like your starters or Snorlax, or typically rare ones like Dunsparce or Snubbull, while accessing pre-evolutions that aren't wild like a Pichu or something. While breeding the normal way requires much more legwork and can get you access to egg moves, breeding with a Ditto can cheat the process though, ignoring the gender specificity. At this point, only really being helpful for filling out the Pokédex pages after playing through the game is out of the picture. Unfortunately, that's where the usefulness ends in practicality. As egg moves, despite being a great addition, don't get me wrong, they only really work in a theoretical world. Because to take advantage of set attacks, you have to find the mon you want. If it's not female, then go out of your way for one, find a Pokemon capable of getting the attack you want, running up this useless mon just to get the attack you want, then deal with the breeding RNG time just to get your new level 5 mon with the different thing you want. Where practicality went to die is the idea of getting one of these attacks during your playthrough of the game. For instance, look back at the footage I just showed you. Getting the Mantine is no problem, but needing to catch the other parent, here a Poliwag, before grinding it up to learn Hydro Pump, it's already painful alone, as this is at level 43, which in the context of the game is in the Elite Four's level range, meaning you're pretty much ready by Kanto at the earliest. Levels that not only are coming out of the potential EXP of your other mons, but even the one you're plotting to use is being redirected to a mon that's getting sent to the bench permanently after its only job is done. But sure, waste your time hatching the egg, and time, friend of man, is here, where you, with your thumb up your ass, has to immediately do a multi-hour grinding session to play catch-up. But now that the mon's ready, there's a new problem. The fact there's almost nothing left for content to even use it for. It's less of a problem if the battle tower exists in your game, and sadly Stadium 2 connectivity is nothing more than a pipe dream. Remember, this is in the context of one Pokemon gotten in the mid-game. God forbid we pick something more annoying to level like a Kanto locked mon, or something you'll likely have to replace and potentially rebreed several times for a correct gender like your starter. This feature in the context of the game just ends up being such a dreadful uphill battle that's actively more painful than tripping and landing eye first onto a thumbtack. The fact it took till Gen 8 at the earliest to even address this issue is genuinely bewildering, and now you can see why I keep writing this off as basically a post-game feature, because you're sure as hell not using it in the mid-game. Although thankfully, when we get to move on, we find a feature that does respect your time. Although it's complete RNG, so it's hardly even that. Being the game corner, which is basically untouched from Gen 1 plus one more. You can still put money in for some slot machine to go gambling, or play the new game where you gotta guess where the flipped card is. Meanwhile, the rewards you want can easily be gotten from buying coins with Pokédollars, so you don't actually have to grind the slots. It's of course still completely optional, and now there's 2 sites to exchange rewards at. Aiding in the money economy, this game implements a bit of a banking system with your mother's savings. Essentially, you can opt into a phone exchange that sends home a portion of your funds after battle to what's basically just a bank to be picked up or added to later. While the money saving is something you could pull out whenever, which is great, keeping it enabled actually enables a lineup of rewards, meaning there's actually incentives to keep it on. Such rewards are normal items, but mainly new house decorations are among them, so at least your room can be customized a little just so you never go back in there at all. Yeah, that's something alright. Way off site, but a new feature we got is a complete game changer with the move deleter. Yes, gamers, that means to delete any attack off mons, finally allowing HMs to no longer leech move slots permanently, something that they did to ruin mons in Gen 1. Now ensuring the I'm too lazy to grab an HM friend, so I'm just teaching an HM approach now isn't lethal, which finally leaves us with trading. After reaching Ecritique, you earn the ability to trade with Gen 1 games, and it's really restrictive because the whole can't bring new attacks into the old games thing really just holds it back a bit, but like, what can you do? Other than bringing in otherwise uncatchable Gen 1 mons, this method is really just the source of many rare items automatically added to those that you get from trade. So there's that. Where we're done with Gold and Silver's gameplay front. Sadly, Crystal does leave a bit more on the table, so let's just go ahead and pull off the Band-Aid. Breaking open the Crystal Dam, we begin with the world as things are new. Immediately noticeable as a girl is a newly playable option right out the gates. There is no difference at all provided here. She just serves as another alignment of pixels to potentially see throughout the whole game, at least giving the illusion of more uniqueness between runs of the game. What actually matters is the world's evolution, which does not include much at all. Like, what even is there? Some areas like the Champions Room are redesigned to have a much better presentation. The Ruins of Alph gains a small puzzle for pitiful rewards on the other side alongside attempted lore. Meanwhile, the Dragon's Den is just a neat alternative to the Dragon Fang finding, with a reward if you really want to come back for it later, at least tying in better to the game's overall plot themes. All these little ups come at the cost of making your life more miserable, with a brand new backtracking trip, baby, brought all the way to the Pseudo-Wudo tree, and then all the way back to Goldenrod for no reason, where you previously just talked and went. Yeah, a great waste of about 5 minutes, hardly making the game seem worth it so far. Well, we'd hoped the real difference maker in Pokemon variety in tidying up the main battle offering sadly fumbles once again. In terms of trainers, the pre-existing stuff isn't really changed much on the surface level, being the area that needed the most amount of work. Bad trainer diversity, bad level curve, less than stellar Pokemon diversity. All of this is still here in spades, and the grinding is still at your front doorstep, wanting you to even do so to make a full team plausible. It's not good, but in an effort to make the game hurt less, we have very little. First up is a few extra trainers scattered throughout the world. Whether it's on routes or tied to the new Suicune quests, the supply given for optionals, mind you, is weak, but it exists. And what do we get? 2 new force battles. One in the Dragon's Den because it's different now, and of course a previously optional rival battle. Yes, gamers, the level curve does not get fixed whatsoever from these, especially if we mention the formerly mandatory battles. Now, not. Although a big shout to this Dragon team for having level 37 at this point. That's right on par with the trainer you just beat. Alongside them, the optionals just do not manifest the XP to make the run even cleaner. We have a word for this, and it's a fumble. The redemptions of the Mons lineup is small, but inarguably better. Outside of shuffling some Mons around the world, like kicking Sneasel out of Silver Cave over to Ice Path, there's not really too much. The arguable worsening is the new Suicune quest, as this takes place after the Goldenrod takeover is finished, and is still optional, thank goodness. But here, Suicune is no longer a roamer, but a standard interactable encounter, where the plotline is just dropped basically immediately. Like, wow, thanks Eugene for being a character I have to fight and then don't care about. Actually, fighting him is completely optional. You can just go catch Suicune if you really want to. Thank you random dudes for being completely pointless. Lovely. So for the legendaries, Suicune's easier to get. Raikou and Entei are still tedious, retaining their roamer status. Lugia, like in Gold, is delayed until you reach Peter City. And of course, Ho-Oh got caught in the crossfire, as now to get him, you have to suffer through getting all 2 of the roamers. Meaning now, there is a reason to suffer. One good and one bad, which is why this is just debatably good. And arguably good though is that the 3DS release of Crystal ends up granting the player permanent access to the Celebi event in Ilex Forest, only needing to complete Johto to do so. Oh right, the 3DS doesn't have a functional eShop anymore, so this basically is a limited repeatable event, unless you have some freak on eBay upcharge a 3DS with it pre-installed for you. Right. Regardless, all English releases of Crystal have this next bonus on standby with the odd egg. This inclusion is a free gift encounter gotten once to the daycare that does 2 things. 1, having massively increased shiny odds, and 2, its biggest detail is that it's got a selection of 7 potential mons that can pop out of the egg at random once the egg is gotten, which definitely helps open up the team builder quite a bit. The big 4 here of note being Pichu, Elekid, and Cleffa, as they were all previously locked to Kanto, now no longer being so, with 2 of these being electric types that you would actually want to consider using in a world deprived of Marie, because version exclusives still plague 3rd improved versions. While Magby now joins the other 3, considering it's now been banished to Silver Cave. Our remaining 3, on the other hand, are much worse, but having them sooner could always be beneficial, as these 2 that are gotten pre-Whitney now, instead of waiting until after Claire and after the radio tower for Tyrogue and Smoochum respectively, with Tyrogue's case being better as it's gotten at level 5 2 badges in versus the previous level 10 8 badges in, killing a detour for grinding. Igglybuff of course drops the ball because the route with the daycare just has Jigglypuff in the wild, giving you a true dud encounter since it only loses you time grinding, and resetting it means you gotta do another egg cycle to potentially get it again, with the free Dizzy Punch hardly being worthwhile but appreciated. Like the feature's inclusion as a whole, very useful, minus the tedium of hatching the egg itself. Although with your newfound Pichu, you filthy mascot Pokemon user, you get new problems for another solution, as now in the Johto arc, you can actually evolve the damn thing, as the Pokegear gets yet another buff in somewhat similar way to how the trainer rematches work, as here there's 4 trainers on the map that you gotta beat in order to register their numbers in order to be eventually reached out to receive their color rock, being yet another case in which that limited 8 slots in the phone book may be detrimental, but hey, at least you'll be able to evolve those mons now rather than waiting till after the credits, and over half the game is done to deal with, and now it's even a farmable supply. It's great, ignoring all that real-time nonsense, which lastly just leaves the move tutor for features. A man on a twice per weekly cycle who teaches a move a day at a measly cost of completely farmable. Comes the replayability features, pretty much the move tutor, odd egg, and stone accessibility is what's massively making a difference here, sadly only being half of what's new. When the side features roll in for Crystal, things are completely dire as it all sadly feels like a waste. The Battle Tower ends up as the game's other big thing, as the series' first battle facility, probably the weakest of them all. With the Crystal iteration, it's the second worst the feature's ever been through, as of course you select 3 mons against a random batch of 7 trainers in order to be rewarded with a stat booster item, which are completely pathetic awards. Cool. The so-called bad part of this challenge is the level selection for you to even play on, between 10 options, all ending in a 0, requesting you to grind up a squad to match said levels and hopefully never accidentally level past. All because we're still years off of level scaling ever being a thing. For our first actual piece of endgame content, it's pretty skippable, although it's at least helpful as a means to do trainer battles to get around the Pokegear nonsense without the repetition of the Pokemon League. Our next feature is another reason to use the Pokegear with the password show. With a new show, you can get a daily chance to see a password to cash out at the radio tower for some points for a pitiful reward lineup such as the Battle Tower rewards. Fun. But no, it's really just a waste of time, again, tied to a time-based feature, which drags us to our next feature. It's almost like it's literally just those two things, and anything more just doesn't exist. Oh, there is no other feature, I see. Unfortunately, Crystal is just a meaty side grade to Gold and Silver content-wise, really leaving the important changes to all lie in the playthrough unless you really need that endless content flex that the Battle Tower will give you. It's all doubly odd as you never really have to play the Kanto postgame to even access any of it. With the pivot to the art direction, it's not the greatest. Graphically, the overworld benefits in the Game Boy Color, having proper color. Trees, the ground, trainers, and all the such are able to have their own unique colors all at once to make the world feel far more immersive and look sharper. It definitely really helps make up for the lack of overworld sprite work quality. Meanwhile, in battle, the mons look pretty damn great, only hindered by the complete abyss of the background. But that's hardly a big deal, especially when we have an up visible EXP markers now. Regardless, graphically speaking, the game's fine. Musically though, it's just average on average, being just a fine audio experience that provides mostly forgettable but appreciated music, just sadly very little in terms of genuine good pulling up the rest. But overall, this section's just fine and just has some charm to it, although the system in question absolutely leaves a lot to be desired. 3 years after the events of Pokemon Red and Blue, our sequels take place. Yes, gamers. Non-existent plot carries over to be even more nothing. Essentially, the professor sends you off on a fetch quest where you're given the Pokedex to begin your adventure, where you, of course, to a non-creatively bankrupt individual surprise, repeat the Red and Blue plot once again, collecting the 8 badges, but in Johto, where some gym leaders are completely insufferable. Team Rocket comes back, but it doesn't matter because they end up failing in their goal, which is just to bring back their leader who never comes. Yeah, this is a complete waste. We get an actual character this time with the rival, just being a jerk who wants to be the best, but because you exist that never happens. And after a failure against the champion, character development starts as the whole message of treating your creatures like friends instead of tools begins to set in to lead them to better results, where of course now you beat the champ and the Johto arc has ended, and Kanto starts with you once again collecting badges and cleaning up the stragglers, with the rival arc closing and a random rocket grunt to end the game there. No, silly, red doesn't exist. You're never going to spend the time to actually grind for that battle. Who cares if it's your trainer who stopped Team Rocket from the previous games? But yeah, gamers, that's all. Dry with a little bit more at least going for it. The pre-Gen 5 plot, it just sucks, and there's not really much to it. It is what it is. It's got its few moments that matter. Remember, gamers, Heart Gold Soul Silver is separate, so all the extra details sadly don't apply here, particularly leaving the rival and Team Rocket feeling a bit half-baked, but hey, that's the entire game for you, which is how we get to end things. And there it is, gamers, another more observant sightseeing session of the hell pits that Gold, Silver, and Crystal are at their worst, and at their best, I don't know, it's a stepping stone for good Stadium 2 content, I guess. Fortunately, here with Gen 2, we were given games that the devs actively cooked too hard on, burning the food, where we see good strides in overworld navigation alongside a few of the features that come with it. God forbid we hit that mass supply of very needed battle improvements that make things a stale experience. God forbid a second time, as now we've gotten shreds of proper content once the actual postgame rolls around. However, the amount of flaws that we see in terms of actually playing through the game are like an avalanche, constantly beating you down with an onslaught of complete nonsense, whether it's Pokemon accessibility being in the gutter, or astronomically unbalanced and uninteresting leveling that you've got to deal with across the whole game. And it's 2 regions of this, which is ignoring the complete time-wasting features like eggs and roamers, God forbid day of the week events, a very subpar at best to miserable at worst experience of just mindless lacking variety, with an absolutely pitiful offering that makes you want to be out of the battling sections as soon as possible. They somehow found a way to make the most important piece of playing through the game unfun, and I don't really know how that's possible, especially with 2 regions. This game is a great stepping stone, but not a great standalone. But that answer was obvious. The level curve just makes so much of the game's content completely trivial, the mind-numbingness is noticeable in the mid-game, sure, but damn near the entire second act is just subject to horrid battle quality, while being dense in quantity sure as hell is not helping the game beat the sleep aid allegations. All because Mr. Pokemon once again laid down the law with the mental gymnastics that don't work in execution. question. But if any of the Kanto trainers or gym leaders had Pokemon higher level than what Lance had, let's say in the 50s range, then these random generics could come off and go be the next champ. And we can't have that now, can we? As if in-universe reasons can't fix this gameplay world-building hurdle, all to be stuck with a dated mess that isn't worth playing. Ones that fake the title of the best Game Boy Color games. They're not even the best Mons games on the system. But it's even more insulting when we're given a third improved version of these games that kept every single dire problem that these games had intact. And for what? A roamer being a plausible pickup, a few encounters shifted around while version exclusives still exist in a tower you'll likely not run more than once. You take massively flawed games, change the smallest aspects by tidying them up in like the worst ways. That's a summary of what Pokemon Crystal is, just slightly better but unneeded game that I previously had labeled as filler, and that label sure as hell stands. Gen 2 as a whole is lucky that it's a very needed mechanical transition from Gen 1 to 3, because that's what it does best, is be on paper. So once again, to drag in the rating for the game, and a 1 to 5 score, they are both pitiful 2s that, despite all the 1-ups from Red and Blue, they somehow make the quality of those games look arguably better in some areas, which will answer the question we asked at the beginning of this video of, are the games any good? No, not really. And technically, that is a yes, until gamers learned what good games are, not bound to what the early 2000s had to offer. Standards do rise as games get better. That's unfortunately a side effect of gaming. That's why when you sit here and you're like, yeah, dude, Pokemon Gold and Silver, masterpieces. Yeah, masterpieces to sit alongside games like Red Dead Redemption? Really? You're gonna tell me that a flawed disaster of a game like this is on par or better? You're kidding. You're just lying to yourself. Remember, in this kind of context here, this discussion we're having, it's a more critical thought, yes, objective this, objective that, to find what is good or bad through analysis. It's not just opinion this, I like that. No. If the games make fuck-ups, they make fuck-ups. And unfortunately, in an effort to make this the biggest, most grand experience ever, these games just bit the bullet called quality. It just doesn't exist. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is just a result of being fair through looking at what the game is and what it offers. It's as simple as that. I mean, we don't even have to look at coding errors like the Moonball increasing the catch rates of Pokemon that evolve through Burn Heal. Like, we don't even have to look at that just to see what's wrong with the game, as funny as a fact as it is. If you like the game, keep enjoying it. An attack on the game is not an attack on yourself. Don't be silly. Although, in terms of asking, should you play the game, the answer will be the same as my personal recommendation of the game. Avoid them like the plague. Not even a save editor can really fix this. Unlike how to certain extents that can be true for the remakes, which were actually the true cause of death of the Gen 2 games. While still flawed across many aspects, a laundry list of positive changes were actually made to make the game tolerable. But as to how good, well, for that one, I gotta say thank you for watching, and until next time, I'm leaving you with homework. The Heart Gold Soul Silver video on the end card, baby. Goodbye and have a good one.